Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I would just like to welcome everybody to this evening's Ecology talk. It is fantastic to see such a good turnout. As some of you would already know, 3 years ago the club's management board here at Saunton Golf Club put together a strategic plan for the club, with a main strategic objective being described as producing first-class golf courses on a sustainable basis in harmony with the local ecology. In order to achieve this objective, it was imperative that we produced a long-term ecological plan. To help us produce this plan, we asked, in mine and many others' opinions, the very best in the business to help us with that. So that is Bob Taylor and Sophie Alesnik, the next to me here, who has also been assisted by Mary Breeds from Braunton. The format for this evening will be an introduction and talk from Bob and Sophie, followed by a Q&A session with Bob, Sophie and Mary Breeds. Mary is well known in Braunton. Not only is she the author of a book called The Wild Flowers of Braunton Burrows, but she also hosts weekly wildlife walks on the burrows throughout the months of June and July. During the talk, can I just please ask that you hold on to any questions that you may have and to raise these during the Q&A session. That is purely just to help with the flow of the presentation. Without any further ado, I'll pass you over to Bob Taylor and Sophie Alesnik.
Thank you so much to every one of you for coming this evening. I hope it'll be a really valuable talk for you all. I hope it will address your concerns about the proposals for the golf course, and I hope we can have some really good conversations as well, and really let you understand why it's important that we do the works that we're looking to do here at Saunton Golf Club. So we'll get right into it. Bob's going to interject whenever he can, if he gets a chance. So if it seems a bit hectic at times, it's just because we're really passionate about this, and yeah. So we'll get into it. So what we're going to go through this evening then. So what is Braunton Burrows? Why is it so special? And why are Saunton Golf Club really important in the conservation of Braunton Burrows and the land that the golf courses lie upon? What are the reasons for introducing new management methods across the golf courses here at Saunton? And what are those proposals? What do they involve across the two golf courses here? And then we're going to show you some examples of some other golf clubs that lie on very similar landscapes, so dune landscapes, and what they're doing around the UK, just so you get an idea. And then we'll open the floor to you guys. If we've not answered some of your questions through the talk, then we'll answer them after the talk. So who are we? So Bob Taylor here, I'll let him introduce himself in a sec. My name's Sophie Alesnik, so I've been an ecologist now for over 7 years, which is kind of nothing in comparison to Bob's 30 plus years, but together I think we make a pretty good team. So I have worked mainly in golf throughout my ecology career, dabbling in some other ecological consultancy work as well, but nothing gives me as much satisfaction as working in golf. Very often working with other landscapes, I'll put together ecological management plans and then they go in a drawer and nothing ever happens, whereas golf is always very proactive and doing the right thing for nature. So we work very closely with the R&A across all their Open Championship venues, making sure that events that they host are sympathetic to the wildlife that lives on those golf courses, and putting together management plans for those as well to make sure they're managed appropriately for both golf and wildlife. We have really good relationships with statutory bodies, so here Natural England are the statutory body responsible for the burrows, but we also work very closely with Natural Resources Wales, Nature Scott and PWS, etc. Really well. And we're both pretty well experienced in dune management and designated site constraints. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Welcome everyone. Great to see so many people here tonight. So I've been in the industry for about 35 years now, and at that time when I started, ecology was just simply a buzzword, something we use in academia in the universities, just like sustainability is today and biodiversity. All of these new words keep coming in. So ecology was one of those, and I started out as an advisor. I was looking at the quality of greens and teas and talking about the management, but I soon realised that that wasn't for me. So I set up an ecology service, recognising that every golf club, every golf course is a nature reserve, whether we know it or not. I'm always faced with golfers saying, what are you doing? Well, I'll be writing a management plan. But this is a golf course, not a nature reserve. No, it isn't. It's a nature reserve. Just listen to that cuckoo, listen to the skylarks, listen to the birds. That makes your experience so much stronger being out there playing that round of golf. And so over 30 years, I've tried to get the outside world to realise that golf is good because it's a golf course and not despite it's a golf course. That's massive. And that's entrenched now. And certainly through the industry, through golf itself, we are much more aware of our environmental responsibilities, our sustainability responsibilities, and that's something that I've tried to bring on for the last 30 years or so. And every golf club is now thinking in a maybe not as proactive as Saunton is trying to be, but most golf courses are trying to do their best now for wildlife and for the environment. So I think a big part of what we do is a big element is to be totally independent. What we offer is impartial advice without bias. If I come here today and I think you should be planting heather on the golf course, I would say it. If I think you should be doing whatever, putting a pond on the middle of the first fairway for whatever reason, then I would say it. So I hope that the advice is impartial and offered without bias. Thank you.
So didn't intend to spend that much time on that slide, so sorry, told you we like talking about ourselves. So why is Braunton Burrows so important? So Braunton Burrows, as you'll all know, I'm sure, is a special area of conservation. It's a site of special scientific interest. It did used to be a national nature reserve, and it's also part of the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve and the North Devon AONB. So basically any designation it could have, it's got. But why is that? Why is it designated? So the main reasons for Braunton Burrows being designated nationally, locally, internationally is because of the habitats that it supports. And they're sand dune habitats. So we've got white dunes, which are those closest to the sea. They go into grey dunes, and then we've got the dune slacks, humid dune slacks, and dunes with creeping willow, which we've got every single one of those habitats, well, maybe apart from the white dunes out there on the golf course. All of those different habitats support a really rich assemblage of flora, and with that, a really rich assemblage of invertebrates, and then we go further up the food chain. There. The site at the moment, so the site is split into many different units. Every single unit at the moment is assessed as being in unfavourable recovering conservation condition. So what that means is Natural England, they go out, unfortunately, much less often than they really should do, conduct surveys and look for the presence of undesirable species, extent of bare sand, etc. And they tick these boxes along their criteria and determine what condition it's in. So unfortunately, yes, at the moment it's in unfavourable condition. The main reason for it being in unfavourable condition is due to the extent of scrub cover and the lack of bare sand. So Saunton Golf Club, we've got a really, really important role here to conserve the land that we lie upon and to do something about that. We really want to be in favourable conservation condition. What a great legacy that would be for Saunton Golf Club to have. The golf courses here, east and west, take up about 15% of the entire Braunton Burrows site, so just to give you that for a bit of context, we can make quite a big change. So, I think that was meant to be shown first. So, just looking back in time a little bit, 1958, you can see how open the dunes were back then, albeit we'd not long come out of a war where this was used as an important training camp. But if you go forward to 2020, it's almost entirely greened. I appreciate we've not got the golf course on here, but there's quite a few things that have led to it increasing in cover, in green cover, vegetation cover, like this. Oh, wrong one, sorry. Yeah, so the boroughs contain almost 1/3 of all native vascular plant species. So that makes Braunton actually the most diverse parish in England. That's incredible. But in recent decades, as you can see from this image, they've become increasingly overtaken by scrub. A lot of that is sea buckthorn scrub, native scrub too, sycamore, home oak, lots of other things, which has meant that over this time they've declined in their diversity of plant species. So now we'll just look at the golf course. I managed to find this aerial photo from the 1950s. So if you look in the red circles there, you'll see there was quite a lot of open sand back then. To today, yeah, quite a bit of scrub and other vegetation in those areas where they were once much more open. So why has that happened? What's caused this process to happen? I'll pass over to Bob for this, I think.
I was going to say, why has it happened? And ask you why has it happened? But the slide kind of ruined it a bit. But never mind. Whenever you go to a golf club, I talk to the secretary and to the representatives of the club. They always show me the old pictures, the pictures pre-1970, 1950, 1940s, and you can see, just as Sophie's just shown there, that the sites were much more open, much more free of invading vegetation. Why? It's because we came along with myxomatosis and we started to kill off all the rabbits. Rabbits were really good at keeping the scrub out. We've lost a hell of a lot of rabbits. Today we've also got viral hemorrhagic disease, which is taking more of our rabbits out, and that means the green staff are having to work so much harder to try to do the job that rabbits were doing. And so on all of the old photographs, whenever you go, probably here in Saunton, we go around the clubhouse, you look at the pictures, no scrub whatsoever, site very open. After 1970 or so, obvious marked increase in scrub, simply due to a lack of rabbits. We've also got other issues now, more modern issues. We've been faced with climate change. Blimey, what does that mean? A warming climate, species are growing more faster, they're dropping more nutrients, but also we're seeing a lot more car emissions, nitrogen oxide falling from the sky. That's having a direct nutrient effect on the ground. We're probably receiving from the sky 15 kilograms of nitrogen per annum per hectare. 15 kilos of nitrogen is simply falling on the ground. Golf clubs are being accused of fertilising the rough, and members are leaving golf clubs because they are so frustrated with the quality of the rough. That's not the greenkeeper's fault. It's what's happening because we drive cars, and it's all falling out of the sky. These issues are massively increasing the amount of scrub. I suppose it's also increasing the thickening of the grasses, the density of growth we're seeing. That has a direct effect on the plant species. It reduces the number of plants that can co-compete with the coarser grasses that benefit from this kind of situation. So we've got rabbits, pollution by way of nitrogen oxides, climate change, and a massive increase in these different areas, the grasslands and the scrub. Here at Saunton, we've got the sea buckthorn, which I think you are all aware of. You're all aware of home oak. This is an evergreen species. Home oak is a plant that comes from the Mediterranean regions. It comes from Greece. It comes from Iberia, from the Iberian Peninsula. It was introduced into the Isle of Wight in the 1800s. It's more recently been introduced into parts of Norfolk. But it's a plant that's enjoying climate change. It's spreading, as many plants are, further and further north. Jays, the jay has been a vector for its spread by just bringing acorns from one site to the next. So it's moved from the Isle of Wight into the southern part of Britain. Over time, it's likely to march a little bit further. But as it does march, it doesn't bring any wildlife with it. It's totally barren. All of the wildlife still lives in Greece, still lives in the Mediterranean. That's not come with it, but the trees here. And so that's another plant that's becoming very prolific here, and we're likely to see a massive increase in its spread as we move through the next 10 or so years. And the green staff will have to work ever harder to keep a check on it. there are equally plants that would be native to the boroughs. Plants like bramble, plants like ivy, hawthorn. And these do have ecological value, so it's about balance. And what we want to do is try to bring all of this into balance within these management plans. And I think we're going to go on to that a little bit later, so I'm going to shut up again and let Sophie carry on.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. So to round that up, I guess, so since the 1960s, scrub and tree cover has vastly increased across not just the golf course, of course, but the wider boroughs, across all our sand dune systems around the UK. Sand dunes, I think I said on one of the earlier slides, they're one of the most rare and declining habitats across Europe. So it's really important that we do what we can to make sure we conserve them and manage them in a way that makes sure we don't lose the rare flora that relies on these open habitats so much. So like I've said there, so sea buckthorn, things like sycamore here, home oak, evergreen home oaks, they smother a delicate plant species. So you imagine under the canopy of a home oak, evergreen home oak, nothing wants to grow there, nothing that wants to live on a sand dune at least, maybe some Yorkshire fog and other undesirable plants. So we really need to make sure that we get on top of them. Not only do they smother out other vegetation, but they spread really rapidly too. So like Bob referred to, it means that the greenkeepers have a bigger job removing them, or we get you guys to come and help volunteer. Anyone? No? So what else has happened? So bare sand has vastly decreased, so that's just as vegetation has filled in, of course. Dune slacks have dried out, so we've got quite a few drier dune slacks out here on the golf course that over time scrub has filled in and they've become almost completely dry in some cases, meaning that we don't have any petalwort, I don't think, on the golf course, which is part of Saunton Borough's designation. So hopefully the works we're proposing to do will mean that we'll get petalwort back someday. Not only that, but dune grasslands have become more species poor as well. So there's a lot of dune grasslands out there on the golf course that are really, really rich. I mean, when Mary came out earlier this year with me and we looked at some of the areas down by 11-12, that sort of odd triangle that had historically been scraped, they're the richest areas of the golf course. Absolutely incredible. So it just shows what happens when we do intervene appropriately. So intervention is required if the site is to be favourable. There you go. I did say it on the slide. But it's not all bad. So like Bob said, not all scrub's bad scrub, not all trees are bad trees. We don't want to get rid of it all. We completely get that native scrub is part of the mosaic of sand dune habitats, just not quite at the extent that it's at the moment. Therefore, we really need to do something about it. So scrub and trees are important for nesting birds, for other invertebrates, for overwintering reptiles and amphibians, and we want to recognise that as well. But even then, we need to manage it in a way that it remains viable for all this wildlife. So what are the proposals? So to summarise, I guess, we want to reduce scrub and tree cover across the golf course to between 5 and 10%, retaining all that along the eastern boundary, understanding that that is the furthest point inland. It remains a good buffer, a good corridor between sites. We want to focus largely on complete removal of species that shouldn't be here. So like we mentioned, sea buckthorn, sycamore and home oak. And we want to look at removing some of the native scrub too, where it's impacting on good dune habitats, and then manage that we are retaining. So making sure we retain tight clusters that is suitable for wildlife, not just sprawling scrub here and there. I think the management plans may be moved on a bit since you've read it, but we want to prioritise mechanical or manual removal of scrub, so making sure that we do remove the roots and all. With that, it means we open up bare sand, which is another element of what we want. But we will have to do some follow-up treatment with herbicide. I think that was some of the members' concerns about the use of herbicides on the golf course. But where we will be using that, it will be targeted directly onto the plants, so through spot treating, which I think basically all of your greenkeeping team are qualified and very good at. Yeah. So another proposal or management aim is to create sand scrapes, so to open up bare sand, knock that natural succession right back and allow those pioneer dune plants to establish. So that will be pockets of bare sand across the course, very much like it used to look like back in the 1950s, 60s, and they'll be allowed to recover over time. They're not going to be huge bunkers that, you know, you're playing out of all the time or anything like that, that have been kept open. The idea is that they do fill in over time and we successionally create others around the golf course as we see fit.
So I'll just interject there.
You may.
While you're reading the last bit. With sand is becoming a very rare resource, certainly for the green staff who need sand to top dress tees, greens, fairways, etc. And in the old days, before sand quarries were developed inland, they would use the sand that's within the dune system by way of taking the soil, taking the vegetation off of the top and then pinching some sand and using that for the top dressing purposes. When you go to places like Muirfield and you play down the 6th hole at Muirfield, there's lots of deep hollows all the way along there. And that's where, in the past, sand has been won and been used out on the course. And you can go around many of the golf courses, the links courses, and you can see these pot hollows, if you like, these small areas where sand has been won. That's where we're going to have to move back to, because the sand quarries inland will be shut soon. All the sand quarries around the coastline have had their licences revoked, and it's been a while now. There is no sand to be had from the coastline. So our green staff at all these golf courses are increasingly relying on the same source, the inland sands, which aren't the same as what you've got here on the coast. We need to be pot winning, locally winning sand. And so by creating scrapes, when we start to take this scrub out, for example, we are creating potentially a scar. That's what we used to call it. The first time we started doing this at places like Carnoustie, it was, you can't do that. We've got the Dunhill, we've got the Open Championship, we've got all these events coming up. You can't do that. Now, it's recognised as essential. They just do it in the routine management programme. But we try to make it fitted and natural, rather than just create a circle that looks like a scar or a square. You fit it into the dune topography. You follow the contours, and we feather the contours into these scrapes so it looks fitted and totally natural. It allows the green staff to win a little bit of sand for that continued use. They can store it, they can use it, and over time we get back to the botanical diversity that Sophie mentioned on the 11th hole. So it's a continual process. It will be phased on an ongoing basis, and while some areas are recovering, other areas will be scraped. It will be an ongoing situation through the short to medium terms, while ever we can keep doing that.
Thank you. So another thing we want to look at as well is, like I mentioned, reinstating some of those dune slacks that have dried up over the last few decades. So what that means is removing some of the scrub that's established through there, scraping some of them back to sort of the winter water table, and in some cases just cutting and collecting where they've sort of built up nutrients. And then the last thing is continuing to manage the dune grasslands wherever we can get into them with the equipment we've got available. So like I mentioned, those grasslands throughout the courses that are cut and collect on an annual or every other year, they're some of the richest and most diverse grasslands within the golf course, and ones that we really want to increase across the golf courses as best we can. So a breakdown. So this is the golf course here. So the management plan that Bob and I put together last year has really been a bit of a catalyst for further assessments and analysis. So by that I mean we had Mary come in and look at some of the areas we were looking to scrape to make sure that they were the right areas we were proposing to scrape. Thankfully they are. We also engaged with the geomorphological and hydrological consultant, I couldn't think of the word then, who came to make sure that the proposals that we were putting together weren't going to impact on the geomorphology or hydrology of the site. They're not. And we also had some UXO surveys done just to inform our surveys, our management plan even further. We've also been able to consult with existing protected species surveys too. So we've got great crested newt on site, so we're making sure that management around the areas where great crested newt are known to be is specific for great crested newt, and making sure that they're protected throughout as well. So the plan looks at most out of play areas really across a 5-year period. So what the plan is for out of play areas is to make sure we manage them as coastal sand dunes. So that means reducing encroaching scrub, managing grassland wherever we can, and creating smaller scrapes here and there whenever Murray and his team have got time to do so. And then of course there's some larger works as well, which involves some larger scrape creation, and scrub removal and dune slack restoration. So breaking that down roughly, there's about 2 hectares on the west course and 3.75 on the east course. That's not 3.75 hectares of bare sand. I've not broken it down into the 2 individual things. But yeah, just to give you an idea of the areas of intervention there. So, I didn't think that slide was coming next. Okay, have we missed a slide? Anyway, never mind. Okay, so across the wider boroughs, I'm sure you'll have seen the works that have been going on there for quite a few years. So unfortunately, we've not got Rupert Hawley here with us tonight, but he is the Dynamic Dunescapes manager with Plant Life on the boroughs, who's leading on all the works going on there. So over the 2021 to 2022 winter period, they worked to remove or manage 36 hectares of scrub and 10 hectares of scrapes. So quite a much bigger area than we're looking at here. What you may have seen and been worried about is the look of some of these scrapes. They can look quite excessive and indiscriminate, but they do fill in really quickly, and those pioneer beautiful wildflowers that are in Mary's book soon start to thrive, and it's really that early successional habitat that we're looking at creating throughout the golf courses, and that's really important, not just for flora but for invertebrates like we mentioned, for reptiles, amphibians and ground nesting birds as well. So the next 2 slides, we're going to go through some of the ecological benefits of the proposals, and then also some golfing benefits, which I think Bob will maybe lead on.
I was just going to mention.
Okay.
Sorry. It's interesting on this slide actually, as I'm sitting here in the back, standing here in the background, just looking at the picture. There's different ways in which you can do scrapes. A scrape could be quite a large area, as Sophie said, to reinstate the dynamism of the sand dunes. It's all about taking out that vegetation that's become too much, that's become rank. And you see that all the time when a ball goes out into the rough and you can't find it, and you're thwacking through that thick, coarse, lush grass. That's the kind of stuff you're trying to remove, not the finer fescue, the bents, and the better quality grasslands. In an area like this where things have maybe been overgrown with scrub, then here the scrub the sand has been created in a more fractured manner, and that's fantastic for things like sand lizard. Sand lizard is present within the Braunton boroughs. You can imagine a kestrel or a bird of prey flying over, they're going to take sand lizard, which is one of our rarest reptiles. And if they can be just on the edge of these bits of turf that are being left, ready to jump back into the grassland, that's perfect habitat for them. It gives them that protection, that safety. So that's a really nice example of a more fractured structure. Sometimes a larger area could be created. If it's a big area of scrub that's been removed, it might be much larger, but as I said, that would be more fitted, more natural, fitted into the dune terrain.
Thank you. It's becoming very fractured, this talk, isn't it? Sorry. So what are the benefits for wildlife as a result of what we're proposing here? So there are some benefits for birds. I know there's some concerns about tree removal and scrub removal with regards to birds. The first thing to note, I guess, is that we just want to reduce scrub and trees across the site, not completely eradicate. So there still will be a suitable nesting habitat. But what's really interesting to look at is that over half of England's most threatened breeding birds are ground nesting birds. So skylark, wheatear, meadow pipit, lapwing, which Bob will come on to. They all need open, expansive grasslands and bare ground as well, for both foraging and for breeding. Scrub and trees support predators, so if we can remove those from these larger areas, it means we get better breeding populations of these ground nesting birds. What tends to happen on the wider Braunton Burrows that are completely open to people and their dogs is that a lot of ground nesting birds don't actually get the opportunity to breed, or at least be successful in breeding. And so actually in golf and in golf courses around the UK, we've got quite a unique responsibility or opportunity, I suppose, to actually protect and conserve a lot of these ground nesting bird species, which are, I think all of these are either amber or red listed birds of conservation concern. So these large expanses that we've got between golf holes, where hopefully not many of you are often wandering looking for balls, could provide really, really valuable habitat for ground nesting birds. And lapwing, an interesting one. Bob.
Sorry for being fractured. But a lapwing, I said to Sophie, could we put a picture in of the lapwing, because it is the club's emblem. And so Sophie put this picture in, and look at it, it's a beautiful bird, stunning. But lapwing has declined so much, it's now classed as an agricultural bird, a bird of agricultural fields. We find it in open ground habitats within farmland, where the soil is present rather than the dense crops. You will see it in thinner crops, but equally in marshes and areas of open ground like sand. During COVID, after COVID, as I started going back around the different golf clubs through the country, I've realised that on a number of courses, lapwing has actually returned. It's bred on a few of the golf courses. It used to breed here back in the 1950s. We need to look to how possibly we can bring it back to Saunton. It is coming back on a number of courses, although as soon as COVID ended, it's kind of gone again just because of the number of people that are playing out on the course. But here, the land is, you've got a massive amount of land that if we could start to reduce the amount of vegetation, go back to more open sand, there's every possibility that we could get lapwing to breed again. How wonderful would that be?
So benefits for flora, I think I've probably mentioned this one too many times, but like I've said, there's no petalware, or at least not in the areas that we're looking at doing the works at the moment. There may be some in the ditches, we never know. We maybe want to look at that a bit more closely, the ditches that are unmanaged. But yeah, lots of other sensitive pioneer dune plants will hopefully benefit from these works. They've certainly benefited across the wider Braunton Burrows and other sites throughout the UK, which we'll move on to. Very conscious of time, sorry. So benefits for invertebrates as well. So Mary and I were joined by Jamie from the Bumblebee Conservation Trust back in August for a bit of a site walk, and she was amazed to find the brown-banded carder out on the golf course, so areas where we've got Viper's bugloss and other nectar and pollen-rich plants, more so in areas that have been scraped in the past. She was really impressed by that, and there's every chance that with these works and as we improve the biodiversity of the flora across the site, that we'll also get mossy carder bee and early Cletes bee as well. So yeah, a really unique opportunity to work with Bumblebee Conservation Trust on this plan as well. Benefits for reptiles too. So This is a common lizard that we found back in August. We don't have sand lizard on the golf course at the moment. It's more focused on the fore dunes. But there's no reason that with the works that are going on with Braunton, the wider Braunton Burrows and here, that we can't link some of that habitat and they return here at some point in the future. Sand lizard need pockets of scrub as well, because that their invertebrate prey will be on there anyway. And then benefits for golfers, a few, but yeah, Bob.
Yeah, so this is a golf course, not a nature reserve. This talk has been entirely devoted to nature. Come on. So what benefits are there to yourselves? When I was thinking about this slide, I thought, well, individually, you're going to get some disturbance during the year of your membership. But you are in any year, I suppose, because it's the nature of golf. We have to keep active. We have to be proactive with regards to management. We cannot stand still, otherwise the course will change out of all recognition. And the course that you love and you've come to buy into will be very different to the one that you're playing on now. And I was sat there a little bit early and we were talking about Burnham and Barrow going back into the 90s. When Burnham and Barrow had so much sea buckthorn that the fairways were lined with sea buckthorn. And look at it now, how open it is. It's far better. You can see the crests of the sandhills, the topography of the sandhills. So without management, standing still would be very detrimental to you as players and to your visitors who come and love the course. There are a number of issues you could think, well, feeling of well-being. I used to, when I visited so many golf courses, you often see people dragging their clubs into the clubhouse, into the changing room, and you hear someone say, how did you get on? I didn't play very well today, but I enjoyed it. Why did you enjoy it? You didn't play very well. You've lost 3 or 4 balls, but I enjoyed it. Why? Because of those beautiful surroundings that you're playing in that make you feel better. You don't need to know the names of the skylark or the medipipid or that dragonfly, what type it is. It's just being out there in that environment that is so special. And that's what we need to keep and conserve. Can you imagine dragging your clubs in and, how did you get on today? Oh, I played rubbish. I hated it. It was rubbish. I lost 3 balls. That's not what we want. We want you to come into the changing room and say, I didn't play very well, but I enjoyed it. That's what it's about. So there is this individual feeling of well-being. But I suppose there's something a lot more strategic as well. The reason we do this is because Saunton is one of the top 100 golf courses in the world. We need to keep a level that we've set. I was going to say a prestigious level, but maybe we just need a level that we know that we want to be at. And we're happy at that. We would drop out of the top 100, you would start to decline, you would start to go backwards. Is that what we want? The idea is to encourage more and more members through social media these days, through all the channels that we've got, so that we can bring those visitors in, did I say members then? Bring visitors in and let them enjoy everything that you've got. And so if we think much more broader than our self-interest in that, well, we might see some disturbance on a year-by-year basis, we should, we would be, I suppose, going down the right track. So there are strategic reasons for doing this.
Thank you. Yeah. So we want to see this as an opportunity for positive change. So this project is to be funded through Natural England, through the Rural Payments Agency, which, they're quite specific with who they give funding to these days. So it's really quite impressive that they do want to help us out here. They recognise the importance of the landscape, of the habitats that we've got, and how much they do need intervention. So this funding is rolled out over a 5-year period. So a lot of works will be undertaken in the first couple of years and then spread out over the next 3 years after that. And then hopefully we would get more funding after that 5 years too, but who knows what the government will be doing then. We'll not talk about politics. So Natural England are wholly supportive of the plans. Like I said, it's very much what's been undertaken across the wider Braunton boroughs and around the UK's other sand dune systems. Not only that, but the RNA are also very much behind this project. So they have a lot of sustainability initiatives as part of their GC 2030 project. One of those is to aim for all RNA venues that lie within designated sites to become favourable in their condition status. So Royal St George's managed to achieve that just before they hosted the Open, and I don't see why we can't achieve it here if we do these works. So I just mentioned Royal St George's there. We're kind of ending on Saunton now, but we just wanted to show you some examples of other golf clubs around the UK who also lie within designated sites on sand dune systems, and let you see what they've been doing and the impact that's had or will have. So like I said, Royal St George's here, that lies within Sandwich Bay, SAC and SSI, so the same types of designations as we've got here. They've had a really close, long-standing relationship with Natural England. Natural England and other statutory bodies usually really like golf courses once they get in and see them, because we offer such a unique landscape to manage. Very often golf clubs have got the drive, have got the funds sometimes, they've got the people and the skills to be able to do a lot of the work that Natural England can't do on ordinary nature reserves and things like that. So at Royal St George's they went through a whole programme of scrub removal, dune slack restoration, grassland management, sand scrape creation, again echoes of here, and they achieved that favourable condition status back in 2021, which is a massive achievement. Royal Porthcawl, a bit closer to here. They've worked alongside NRW, so they're same as Natural England but in Wales. They're quite unique in that they've got dune heath as well at Royal Porthcawl. Now they don't actually lie within a designated site but provide good linkage between two designated sites, and so they're important for that reason. So they've worked with another golf club, Pyle and Kenfig Golf Club, and they've restored a lot of dune habitats. So 5 hectares of gorse scrub has actually been removed there to restore dune heath, dune grassland and bare sand habitats across the golf course. Again, all in conjunction with NRW and the local council actually here. That's just some images there. So the top image is a before and the below, and to the right is an after. So you see the diversity that's coming back there. Royal St David's Golf Club as well. Very similar again, SAC, SSI, NNR. They've created some absolutely huge scrapes. We're not proposing to go that big, promise, but it just shows you what is possible when you work with these other organisations to do proper conservation management. Hillside Golf Club is a really interesting story. Again, Sefton Coast, SAC, SSI. They're actually over a kilometre from the sea, so I guess, are we? No, a little bit closer, but yeah. But here we were able to create quite a big dune slack, and after just 1 year we've had the first record of this purple crystal wort that's not been seen in that county in over 100 years, which is insane. So there were some very excited botanists at Hillside. Royal Birkdale, sorry, this is probably getting a bit tedious now. You will get sent this presentation, but yeah, hopefully you can see Royal Birkdale, again another open venue. We've worked really closely with Natural England there to put together a management plan involving quite a bit of scrub and tree removal. So top is before, bottom is after. Please interject if you want to.
Getting tired. I think the membership at we did a similar presentation last autumn with Natural England on board to try to get the members of Royal Birkdale on board with the management plan. We did get quite a lot of opposition to start with from a number of members. They were quite concerned about the amount of gauze that might come out and opening up some of the dune systems that have been there forever. Why is this going on? But now they've done it, all of the members are over the moon with it. If you look on social media, they're posting all the time, and it's fantastic because it's giving the club the opportunity to sell the work that's being done. It's creating a much wider perspective, and if they're doing it as a championship golf course, why can't others do it? So, yeah, very positive.
Mention John Kelly.
Mention John Kelly?
Yeah.
John is a conservation greenkeeper, superb. Yeah, he's one of the best bird watchers I've ever come across, and I'm ad-libbing now because I didn't know about this. But he won conservation. I used to run a golf environment award in my former employ, and I took him to Portugal. He was one of the best bird watchers I've ever seen. He can identify everything just by the faintest noise or whatever. Really, really good. And one of the main people I would have thought to oppose all of this because of the scrub would have been John, but he's over the moon with it, and the different birds he's starting to see, the number of birds he's starting to see within the designation is, I think he's very, very, very happy and impressed with it all. Is that what you wanted me to say?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad. Who's John Kelly?
So I was at Birkdale earlier this year doing some biodiversity assessments, and we still managed to record, I think it was 44 different bird species over the 2 days I was there. Because there's still scrub on site, pockets of good scrub, sorry. So they're still there. So staying on the Sefton Coast, Southport and Ainsdale Golf Club, very similar to us here in that they did a lot of work under countryside stewardship funding, which again was opposed initially, but you'll see there we opened up quite a few scrapes. I think I got another one, so that's the most recent one. So some have filled in, new ones have been opened, we've sort of kept this rotation going. So now they're outside of that agreement, they just continue, understanding that they've got that sort of legacy to continue with. And then Trevose, same again, really. So they're still under an agreement, a different one to countryside stewardship, but they're sort of progressing over the 5-year plan, getting rid of a lot of sea buckthorn on the dunes.
Does anybody play at Trevose? You've all been? Yeah, when you look now from the clubhouse and you just look out across the course, you can see all of this open sand. Is it down on 5, 6 across that belt, coming back towards the would be the second to third, and then the sand hill that runs left of the third. All of that's been opened up, and they've got sand lizard back there. It's a stunning golf course now. A few years ago, when I first did the management plan, it was just from the clubhouse, it was just grassland. But now the look of it is stunning, and I hope you'd agree with me on that. But next slide.
Okay, you can do this one then.
Royal Liverpool. I've been involved with Royal Liverpool forever because I am the accredited ecologist for the R&A. So I have to do all of the open venues each year. And over the last few years, you will all know that the 13th hole is now the 17th hole. It's now, instead of moving away from the coast, it's playing back towards the coastline. The green is elevated on the coastal margin, and to do that, we had to talk to Natural England, and they said, look, we'll let you have this all, but we want sand scrapes down the SSI. The site is becoming unfavourable, increasingly unfavourable. Burnet Rose is a negative indicator, and we need you to start doing some scrapes. The club have taken it on board. They've never looked back. And these are just a few images, and pity that they're a little bit small for people at the back of the room. But so many of these large scrapes have been undertaken now through that coastal fringe. Can you see how they are fitted into the landscape and not just square or rectangle? These are shaped to fit with the nuances of the ground, and they look absolutely stunning. So next year we've got the Open Championship. Why would we want sand scrapes at the time of the Open? Because it's okay to have sand scrapes, and it's part of the R&A's sustainability strategy that we need to bring ecology back, and we need to start thinking about and the environment in all its guises. So it's accepted, but wow, it looks good. Hopefully some of you will get to see that next year.
That's it.
So thank you, everyone. I think we have got sort of a couple more slides of the members' concerns and interests, and maybe we'll look at those in a minute, and if there are no questions we can look at them now. But I think at this point it might be better to open up to the floor to see what kind of questions you might have. So thank you for listening to us.
Thank you.
Any questions, please?
Who's going to undertake the work?
The
Do you want me to answer that? So with the countryside stewardship, we have to submit quotes from 3 different contractors, but it ultimately is the club's decision which contractor gets chosen. So it will be a contractor. We won't be taking Murray and his team away from looking after the playing surfaces.
Who pays for the work to be done?
So that's through the Rural Payments Agency.
Sorry?
So the Rural Payments Agency. So it's all funded because it's such a difficult site, they call it, and a priority habitat. There's an option we can use that means we can get 100% funding.
So the club doesn't pay for that?
No. I think the lady behind. Oh, sorry. Go on.
I see that the golf course is 15% of the brook. Playing the golf course, you walk round and you see loads of scrub, loads of blackthorn. Are we going to end up with like an oasis of green and the rest of the boroughs look like scrubland still?
Well, hopefully not. I mean,
The J's still going to come, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
He's not going to say, okay, we're going to go up into the other part of the boroughs. It's not going to look, you know, like a bit of an oasis of green.
No.
I think the whole idea is to remove scrub as and where it's regenerating, and also remove the scrub where it's already very dominant. But again, as Sophie said right at the outset, the native scrub we want to retain, because the wildlife, for example, in bramble, golfers don't like bramble, but where it's very dense, it's really good for small mammals, for inverts, and for birds and food and all the rest of it. We know it is. But it's that adventitious growth, we need to be just cutting that out. There'll be a job for the greenkeeper on a routine basis to do that, just part of good housekeeping. So take out the adventitious growth and to deal with any regen. But equally, as areas of inappropriate scrub are being taken out, it would be so we're not having to go back in and treat the regrowth constantly and keep fighting that kind of problem. It's easy just simply to scrape it out and to create something like you've just seen. So what you get is you get the green of the fairways, 20 hectares of lush green fairways, just exactly the same as you've got now. The rough would be exactly the same as it is now, but within the rough you'd be seeing open areas of sand. These are offline, so hopefully the majority of you wouldn't be in them, but where they do start to encroach a bit, that's been necessary because of the types of grasses. The grass is so lush in those areas that we would need to scrape it, and then at least you can find a ball. Might not be, it'd be similar to a bunker. Not ideal from a playing point of view, but it's a damn sight better than playing out of a very lush grass vegetation. So it'd be a mosaic, and it would be very similar. The beauty of golf courses, as Sophie said right from the start, is that often they have got a little bit more resource and a bit more commitment to the management. Nature reserve managers, with all the will in the world, are looking over the fences at golf courses and thinking, wow, if only we had the resource and the people and the staff and etc. to kind of do that kind of work, the machinery. As Sophie said, that's so important. But the nature reserve managers just don't have that. They rely on the landowners, the farmers, the golf clubs, everyone within the designated sites to do that work. And golf as a wider industry is faring far better than the non-golf areas. So when you look at favourable condition status, the figures used to be, last time I looked, about 58% favourable within the golf element, and only 40% or so outside. So golf is doing a lot better on a national average. So yeah, it's golf is good. Golf can be really good with appropriate management. Sorry, the lady just behind.
I really like the idea that we're going to do things towards more nesting birds. Is there anything within the plans that is going to help us? I feel that we've got a lot of crows around the golf course, and surely they're contributing towards stealing the birds' eggs. And is there anything that could be done?
Yeah. I think we often get hung up on this, and we maybe shouldn't do so much, because smaller birds are used to that. The kind it's designed in. So small birds will lay a clutch of a certain size. If for example it's a skylark, it might lay 4 to 6 eggs. And it might have 2 clutches, so that could be 12 eggs. If we had 12 skylarks, we would soon become overrun with skylark. So it never works like that, because some of them don't hatch properly, some of the young die young, and some get taken by predators like crows. And as long as we get 2 skylarks, we're going to double the population within that year. So 1 or 2 birds successfully surviving out of that nesting season is quite a good result. But we get hung up when we see a bird taking another bird. I've seen mallards walking across with a string of young, walking across some of the away from a pond, and a crow's just come down, taken the last one, and the mallard looks around and goes, meh, meh, and carries on walking. That's not bothered. It's still got 8, and it's still got far too many. And so we do tend to get hung up a little bit too much. But Sophie mentioned that a lot of these trees that we've got on site, they are favouring just the corvids, the crows and the magpies, and will sit around, and they're quite clever, and they'll sit and watch, and where they see an oyster catcher or possibly a lapwing or whatever on the ground, and they just watch and watch, and then they wait, and think there's a nest there, and as soon as the bird's gone, they'll go and they'll take all the eggs. So by reducing tree cover, we can reduce those kind of predators. It's that kind, when Sophie mentioned it will reduce the predators. It's the corvids, the magpies, and the crows that she's really referring to.
Just on that as well. So I was here earlier in the year doing part of the biodiversity project with the RNA, which is a new project that started this year, looking at 23 of the RNA's venues. So all open venues, some of the women's open venues, and then some of the qualifying other RNA venues. So this year was just baseline surveys, but the following 4 years of the project is to look at monitoring different species or species groups across different taxa. So one of those will be birds. So I think here what would maybe be quite nice is to actually focus on surveying the population of ground nesting birds here and see what population trends we actually get as a result of the works as they're undertaken. That's something we want to do across quite a few of the link sites as well, just so we get that data to make sure that, we are increasing populations wherever possible.
What should the policy be towards rabbits, which, from the point of view of the ecology, would seem to be a good thing?
Mm-hmm.
Golf courses don't normally like digging holes.
Yeah.
And until at least a year or 2 ago, there were frequent nighttime shootings out on the golf course. What should happen?
I'll pass the bob.
I'm going to ask Murray now to close his ears. Can you put your hands over your ears? Because rabbits,
it's recorded.
Because rabbits should be accepted a lot more. The first lesson in greenkeeping is how to shoot rabbits, and basically, yes, rabbits are likely to become almost extinct in the next 10 years over a lot of the country. I live up in the Yorkshire Dales, and I used to have to drive around them on the roads. They used to be flat packed, through squashed from cars, and you could not travel on the roads without running back over them. Now you never see them. I see more hedgehogs on the road than I do rabbits, which is crazy. Golf clubs are still have still got rabbit populations in some areas, and I'm often having phone calls saying, can you come down and talk about the rabbits? How do we get rid of them? What we need to think about is more moving the problem. It really does work. We can move the problem by creating large areas of open ground, open sand, for example. Rabbits don't really want to go and sit on the top of a bunker, scratching away when there's golfers coming by. It would be far better to create the same habitat over there where you aren't going. And we can do that. The only reason they're there at the side of the green is because the green staff have gone over and scalped with the mower. And now the turf is very thin. So rabbits come along and they just scratch away for something to do. If we create the same scalped area across here, now we can move the problem. The area needs to be large enough because rabbits need to be able to see from the ground level out, because they don't want to see predatory birds come in. They want enough areas to make sure that there's no foxes hiding in the coarser grassland. But if we create areas big enough, we can move the problem. And I've been to golf clubs where there's one golf club in particular that was taken over by Japanese owners, and I can't remember which one it was, down Birmingham way, but it had a road running through it. And on one side, we totally did what I've just said. We've created habitats out of the way for rabbits. On the other side of the road, we just left it. And we stopped the problem totally on the side where we moved the problem. It works. And yeah, Pyle Kenfig have been quite successful over the last couple of years in doing similar work. So it moves the problem, but it doesn't stop the breeding, the fecundity. And so there will need to be some control measures often if we want to keep the numbers down a little bit. Shooting tends to take out mainly males, because females stay underground a lot longer unless they're having to come up for food. So all you're doing with shooting is creating fewer, happier males. And so anyway, and so if you want to catch the females, which are the main reason, you want to reduce the population numbers, then cage trapping is really the only way. Cyanide gassing and all the other things that we used to use in the past, no, that is absolutely gone. And but cage trapping is what we need to do. But then what do you do with the rabbits when you catch them live? You've got to have someone who's not going to heaven and do whatever he does or she does, or you let them go over the fence, put them in the burrows. So I think the first thing is here we move the problem, and by doing this kind of work we want to increase and maintain the rabbits, but just have them in the areas where we want them and not areas where we don't want them.
Thank you. But perhaps if the rest of the boroughs areas there would be an obvious place to encourage them to head in that direction.
Yeah. I did some work around Savile. I did some similar work in the Royal Parks, and there you're not allowed to do anything to the rabbits because it's all public everywhere. It's part of the Royal Parks, and this was Savile Gardens and the one next to them, and so we had to fence areas, and then we were trying to move the problem by putting them over the fence into another part of the park outside of the gardens. So there was a gentleman at the back with your hand up.
Yeah, I get totally what you're trying to do here. I think it's amazing in what you've explained, but I don't really get the tree removal aspect of it. And for instance, wouldn't really understand why you would remove an amazing, beautiful tree on the second, for instance.
Okay, that's the oak oak. That's it's sycamore. Okay. Yeah, and Sophie alluded to it earlier. I think the main reason is the tree is compromising the underlying grassland. The grasslands have been designated as important, and the tree is casting shade. There's leaf drip, there's rooting problems, and there's a soil build-up around the tree. So it's totally changing the characteristics of the sand dunes. We're moving away from sand to soil through the tree's presence.
That's in one particular place, and in relative terms, you just need to exercise some restraint in that particular area. If you agree with everything you're doing, that's fine, but just show some restraint.
Yeah, we are keeping the trees like the Monterey pine as much as we can. We are keeping other trees where we can, certainly around the boundary, but in the centre of the dunes where we've got offending trees, if you like, non-native species like the oak oak, like the sycamore, those trees would come out for the restoration and the full restoration of the sandhills. But the majority of trees would the native trees around the boundary elsewhere would actually be kept, and so we have been quite selective and indeed showing that kind of restraint that you're talking about. Which you want to say something?
I was just going to say they're host trees as well, so the more hosts, if you like, that we keep, the more saplings there will be in the future. So if we can really cut them at the source, if you like, that prevents further work further down the line.
I think we've got a volunteer policy.
Volunteer tree poppers as well. We're hoping we can get some tree poppers.
We are looking for volunteers for all of the tree growth, the follow-up work after the initial clearance. Sorry, the gentleman.
Hi.
3 years ago, I did a survey of the nesting birds on Saunton, and there were 5 species of warbler that nested in these 2 golf courses: sedge warbler, garden warbler, willow warbler, chiffchaff, and whitethroat. And since the scrub has been removed in the centre of the courses, none of those birds have come back. And the only bird that I've seen this summer has been a whitethroat, and it's nested, and ironically enough, at the back of the driving range. So your premise that you're increasing biodiversity by removing scrub, I'm afraid I don't actually hold with. Now, for example, holm oak. I mean, that was brought here in medieval times. We've only got maybe 3 or 4 holm oak trees on the entire 2 courses. They do provide shelter. I've seen roe deer underneath them, and I've seen foxes go underneath for cover. They also provide nesting for magpies and for wood pigeons. So they are environments in their own right. If we were covered in holm oak, I would agree with what you say. But we've got very few trees on this course, and I think, personally, as a golfer, I wouldn't want to be playing golf here and looking at nothing but grass, marram grass, and rushes.
Okay.
And finally, as there's only 15% of the 2 courses are scrub, I would say to you, if we're going to convert the whole area into like a desert grassland, I'd be very unhappy with that, and I would want you to keep some of the scrub for birds that are not necessarily nesting, ground nesting birds, because otherwise the only ground nesting birds that we're going to see on these 2 courses are either going to be skylarks, meadow pipits. I'm afraid lapwings are never going to come back because they are all moving north because of climate change. I'm afraid that's finished. And you mentioned at the beginning of your talk that you wanted this to be a nature reserve, not just a golf course. That's exactly what I would like, and I would ask you to temper the removal of a lot of the scrub and the trees and regard it as a nature reserve, and let's have multiple habitats here rather than just a shifting dunescape.
Yeah, it's quite a lot to... Thank you. There's quite a lot to digest there and to go through. I think the first one is we have certainly no intention of removing all the scrub. We've said that all the native scrub would remain. The scrub is important for birds. We recognise... Sorry?
Some of it's coming out.
The bits coming out, but more the dense stuff. So when you mentioned 5 warblers, you could have also had a blackcap there. You could probably also add, and although not a warbler, you could mention reed bunting, because these are the birds that are nesting within the tight and dense scrub on the course. So there's more than you've just said. They need tight, dense cover, because if they haven't got that and it's more open and more sprawly, then these predatory birds, magpies and the corvids that we've just mentioned, are going to come in and take them out. And they're not going to be successful in breeding. So you go to a lot of the links courses and you see these bits of hawthorn where the wind or the storm damage or roe deer have taken the top off, and they're very dense but very low growing. That's fantastic for things like whitethroat, lesser whitethroat, reed bunting, the blackcaps. They're there because the scrub is dense and tight. As I walked around and we produced the management plan, I want to keep that kind of scrub. If it's sprawling and taller and just scrub that's taken over the grassland, it's no real value. A bird might nest in it and he might find a nest, but there's a very high chance that the corvids will take it out. So we want to keep some of the scrub. It's not going to be a total removal of scrub. It's keeping the right scrub and maintaining the favourable balance between scrub and grasslands. Now the scrub is not designated. It's not part of the reasons for designated, but the grasslands are. And this is where perspectives start to come in, because some people are bird watchers. I'm a bird watcher, but I'm also a mycologist. I'm also a botanist. My main passion is in fungi, or it has been for a good number of years. If we see a botanist, they want the grasslands. If we want to see a bird watcher, they want the birds. So we do have to respect everyone's interests, but more importantly, the ecological interests. We need to respect the ecological interests. And what can this site give us? You mentioned the orm oak, and you've just said that one of the main birds nesting in it is magpies and wood pigeons. There's nothing rare, and you said that foxes will sometimes take shelter, or roe deer. Again, they're common wildlife, just like that mallard duck. Often I talk to golfers and I'll say to you, what kind of wildlife do you see? Well, we've got a fox, and we sometimes see some deer. But these are the very common species. Doesn't mean they're less important, but it means that they're not the species that are designated for the site. And the magpie can live around the boundary. There's plenty of scrub for the magpie because it will nest in a much more open stand of hawthorn or whatever scrub they're favouring. So we're not going to lose them. We're simply providing areas elsewhere for them to go because the orm oaks would be gone. But the tight and dense scrub, we definitely need to keep that where it exists for the birds that you've mentioned. So it is about balance at the end of the day and understanding the wider perspective. Clearly, an ornithologist's view is going to be different to the lepidopterist's view. He's interested in butterflies, or, for example, an entomologist might be interested in those bees that Sophie's mentioned. We need the grasslands and the flowers for the bees, but yet you're saying, well, now we need scrub for the birds. Again, it comes down to balance, and I hope that what we've achieved with the management plan is that level of balance.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah, you mentioned about holm oak that you felt there was only a few holm oak trees, and I think initially when I was asked to look at some of the areas where they proposed to do the work, I thought, the same actually. But then when I looked closer, when I was going to these locations, I was just amazed how many young holm oak there were, and just how they do seem to be really flourishing. And as Sophie mentioned, they're native to a lot warmer places, sort of Mediterranean, and as Bob said, yes, they left the wildlife that was dependent on them in those places. So there are non-native species here which are becoming more invasive because of climate change, and there really is, a potential problem with holm oak. And I think this last summer, with the heat wave we had, followed by and then the drought, really favoured the spread of holm oak. And the thing that I often problem, say, with grassland, as opposed to, if you like, trees and scrub, is that, and looking at the moment at some grassland, not meaning just on golf course, other areas that I know that are very good, absolutely fantastic, what we call species-rich grassland in the summer. But if you would, and they've maybe taken a hay crop off or been sort of grazed. So this time of year, anyway, you would not believe how fantastic they were in, say, June, July. But obviously, if you're going to a woodland or a place where there's sort of trees and scrub, and you think, oh yeah, and you can still see maybe a few of the berries, you can still see one or two of the birds, they look a lot more, I agree, a lot more wildlife friendly, perhaps in a lot of the time of the year, if you sort of mean, than maybe some of the grassland. But what I was really impressed with here was when I think Murray showed me sort of just south of the clubhouse, not too well, there's a large area where it's sort of cut and collected about sort of once a year. Is that right? Isn't it? And I mean, and although it was a bit, well, say past the best, because I was mainly here in sort of August, sort of, and things were quite dry, and so. But that area, you could see all the hay rattle, that that it would be absolutely amazing. Or the yellow rattle and the other plants among it, the stork's bills and orchids too. Some of the marsh orchids and it really amazing. And I would say that the management that they're doing there was absolutely spot on. It was almost mimicking traditional hay meadow. That they cut it once a year. They collect what they're cut. In other words, to keep it fairly nutrient poor. So and if that can be replicated with some of the areas that are being cut from scrub, cleared of scrub, and some of the flatter areas, obviously the steeper areas, it's a little bit more difficult to employ that sort of management. But the flatter areas where they cut and collect, are really good. And so yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. I suppose that's a botanist perspective, and we've had bird watcher's perspective. Hopefully we can see there's a need for balance, and that's what we've been trying to achieve. So the gentleman towards the back.
Having looked at your slideshow, you listed various proposals, and some of the photos you showed comparisons of the dune area, not the golf course, but the dunes themselves and the burrows further towards the end. And you were showing open areas of sand, which undoubtedly were the leftovers of probably when the American motorised division was here tearing up various areas. Why don't you use your proposals, which you are saying you want to remove various things, to the other 85% of the burrows and see how successful you are there, and then return to the golf course and make your proposals there, because there's undoubtedly going to be opposition from the members. I'm not going to say a vast majority, but there's undoubtedly going to be opposition.
I think that they both go hand in hand, and you're absolutely right. The work on the burrows needs to be undertaken in exactly the same way as on the golf course. Don't think the golf course is being selected out. I did say to you that nature reserve managers around the country, up Sefton Coast, along Red Rocks around Liverpool, they're all looking at these sites thinking, wow, if only we had the same kind of resources and the same commitment. They're trying, but they've got no staff. They're struggling often with volunteers. They're having to bring people in, and these are big sites, they're big areas. They're doing what they can, and they want to bring them back. They have to bring them back. They have a responsibility to the European communities. Probably they don't now, but
you've got 85% to do your experiment on. What you're effectively saying is you can't afford to do it, but you're going to be using probably members' money, which is funding the greenkeeping staff.
So basically, it's not a trial, it's not an experiment. We've shown you a number of clubs where this is happening. This is not Saunton being selected or picked out. All around the country now, it's becoming part of routine management. And there's a buy-in at every golf club. The other element is you are part of a much larger unit, the SAC unit, or several of those units, and you are just part of that. What we need to do on all our golf courses is to look more landscape-wide, not just micro-managing the golf course, but looking at what other land users are doing. I've just been to Berkshire, to Broadstone, to Aldeburgh, and I've been saying the same thing to all of those, that we must get the other people involved, the other statutory and non-statutory consultees, people of interest, and start looking at what's happening outside of the golf course. How do we bring that management to the golf course so that we have connectivity through the landscape? This is not just about micromanaging what you've got. We have to look wider. We have to look at the boroughs, and we have to make sure that, yes, you're right, that they're doing the same thing. But we're not picking on you as in isolation. And as Sophie said, the money is not going to be, there's always a routine maintenance or routine management going to be required by the green staff. That's inbuilt and it's fine. That's what they do. But the main capital works, if you like, any larger works requiring scrub removal will be undertaken, as was said earlier, through the rural payments opportunity.
You're saying that you stand as a higher authority than nature. Nature put all these various plants, trees, shrubs here, and you're now deciding that you put yourself as a higher authority than nature?
So basically, there's something called succession. So if we go and we strip all of that, all of the golf course back to open sand, which I'm not saying we do, but if we did, it would only be a matter of time before nature started to stabilise the sand that was out there. Initially you get a lot of movement of the sand, lichens would come in, mosses would come in, and then you get annuals coming in and plants would start to come in. The marram, the sand sedge would start to stabilise things again. And then the fescue would come in, red fescue. Without doing anything, it would start to come in. And over time, the amount of marram would decline, fescue will increase, and then we'll start to get other grasses like Yorkshire fog and false oak grass and cocksfoot coming in. So there's a succession. We're moving away from what we started with, and it's getting thicker and thicker and more rank. And if you were playing golf in that, you wouldn't like it. But the next stage is scrub and trees and a woodland. And this course would change out of all recognition from a top 100 linked site, real prestigious site as is, to something more akin to moving towards a parkland state. And that's just natural processes. That's nothing to do with us or anybody, nothing to do with the green staff or anyone trying to change things. Nature does that. It's just a process, and we call that process succession. We have to stop it where we want. So we could say, well, if we want a woodland, all we do is put a rope around it, and we'll have a woodland. We don't need to do any management, just put a cordon around it and stop people trampling. Next thing, we'll have trees. That's fine if the club wants that. Nothing to, nothing to do with me really, if the club want to go down that route. What I'm suggesting, and what Sophie's suggesting, is that succession starts here, the woodland is up here. At some point, perhaps here, that's where we want to keep things. And that's about management. We're not trying to preserve anything or protect it without management. Sorry, protection. We're looking at conservation, which is about managing. So we allow things to get to that point and we keep it there, but we don't let it get to that point. So it's all about managing at a point that we want, that we're accepting as a golf club, as a top 100 golf course.
Can I just go back to... So it just...
Like that tree that was mentioned earlier on, the sycamore out there, that was here, it was a huge tree when I arrived here, over 30 years ago. And you're saying you want to remove that. That tree was there probably 40, 50 years before. But why do you want to remove something that has been part of the course?
Can I just go back to your earlier question? So, like we've mentioned, sand dunes are kind of rare now, and the habitats and the flora that they support are becoming rarer and rarer as natural succession takes hold. And so that's why it's really important that we do these works, because those plants that are very specific to open sand, that are very specific to dune turf, if we no longer have those habitats that support those plants and those invertebrates, such as, I forget, there's a fly species out there, which I know seems very insignificant, but that could be wiped out. Those plants could be wiped out. And I know it's difficult to kind of think about plants compared to birds and things that we know about, but we're doing the right thing here. We really are.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So the sycamore, again, what was I going to say? I've lost my train of thought there. I think Sophie's kind of said it, that this is a sand dune system. The trees come in, and basically Sophie was right to say that that is a host tree. It's a tree that is seeding, and those seeds are spreading and spreading. And while Sophie was just talking then, my mind went to Royal St David's. Sorry, I'll come to you next. Thank you. Royal St David's, as I go out on the 10th hole to Royal St David's and follow the coastline back, and then out along 14, it's all along the coastal zone, those dunes get covered in sycamore very quickly. And Trevose was the same. Out where the sea buckthorn is, as soon as you get sea buckthorn, trees start to grow because there's no predator, sorry, nothing to predate the trees, and they can grow quite well where you've got spiky, thorny scrub. So these sites like Royal St David's, the dunes are becoming overrun with sycamore very quickly, simply because there's a few host trees along the length of those dunes. It's taken a good few years of beating that drum to get them away. initially the club have got to realise that this is a war that we're talking about. All these trees are trying to invade and to come in and to take over. And for me, there's no point fighting an individual battle when you've got a larger war to win. That's what I used to say at Royal St David's. But now they recognise the importance, and as you saw from a couple of slides, that scrub has been removed from the entire dune. The sycamore has been taken out from the dunes. It's necessary if we're going to reinstate those sandhills. Sorry, the gentleman with the glasses.
Yes, hello. My name's Austin Jones, a member here. Just first want to thank both Sophie and Bob. Excellent talk, and I'm fully supportive of everything you've said. I think what's perhaps got a little bit lost in part of the conversation is the fact that the habitat here has been designated because it's a special area of conservation. It's designated because of the flora. And really that's the problem we're trying to solve here. We're trying to make sure that we recover this landscape so that the flora can recover. Now, obviously there are a whole bunch of other environmental issues that people understandably feel emotional about. But actually, the key issue here is the fact it's a special area of conservation. And I think it's really important that, as members here, that we support taking this into a favourable position. I'm a grandfather. I've got 3 grandchildren that live locally. I'd like to think that they all get the chance to become members here. But more importantly, I'd like them to think that we as members, most of whom I'm sure are grandparents here, were supportive of the measures that took this back to a favourable position. And it maintained it as a very, very special habitat, not just for the golf course, but for the whole region. So I thank you for all of the efforts and the thoughts and the plans and the presentation, and the fact that I know that the hierarchy of the golf course is supporting this too. I think it's wonderful, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Esther.
Just one question really about the cycle of works in future. I was really quite excited to hear about these huge scrapes turning up, and maybe educate myself tonight to hear that they actually then grow over again. So are we constantly going to have new big scrapes, and that will just be an ongoing lifetime process now? Is that something to get used to?
Yes. There will be kind of just slightly, they'll be able to play out from the kind of fringe inside. So, they'll be more visible than playable in the main. But it's nice to bring them in. At Turnberry, Donald Trump came across to Trump Turnberry a few years ago. He made the changes, and I didn't want to like the golf course. When I went back, I was adamant that it was going to be worse than it used to be. He did a great job. Damn. But it created...
Recorded.
Oh, yes. Well, Donald never minds speaking out, so why should I? It was a great job that was done, and they created a number of open scrapes, sand scrapes, but they look so good that now the machinery is being bought to keep these. They will not allow them to revert back. It's completely reverse of what we want there. They're now creating these sand scrapes because they look good, and it's part of the visibility of the hole, the aesthetics and strategy of the hole. And there's more and more. This year there's more going on the 7th and 8th holes, for example, the one on 15, and they're big, and they do look stunning. And I think, damn, didn't want that, but that's the way it's gone there. Sorry, lady.
Yeah, if you're going to have large open scrapes, wind erosion is not a problem then?
Yes, in the first year you might see a little bit of wind doing its work, and the sand will blow, and in some instances you might get a bit on the plain surfaces. Aberdyfi, for example, was one where on the 4th hole there's quite a lot came across the fairway in the first year. It's not normal. I normally don't kind of think it's a major problem because it's not usually an issue, but in some instances it depends where the scrape is. You could get some wind blow, but what I've found is that the wind does a far better job than we can when it comes to forming the shapes, the nuances, the embryo kind of dunes, small sand hills that build up, and all of that just adds to the surface area. It adds to the look of it, and it looks a lot better. Within the first year, it starts to stabilise because you start to get jellies over the top, this kind of matting over the top, and you get lichens coming in, mosses coming in. The whole thing starts to form a little cap, if you like, of vegetation, of bracts and bits of leaves that kind of stay over the surface, you'll start to see sand sedge coming in ridges, long runs, and then the marram will start to come in, and it starts to stabilise. So any wind blow is a very short-term thing, and it's normally looks quite good when it's happened. Yeah, we might give Murray a little bit of an issue in one or two areas, but I'm sure he can live with it. Sorry, Murray.
I know in some instances we can always sprig with marram, which can be quite an effective thing to do to try and sort of hold back some of that erosion if it is coming onto plain surfaces. But the areas where we're sort of proposing these scrapes are quite sheltered, I guess. There's some that are a bit more exposed, but I think there'll be measures in place to make sure there's not too much sand blow there. Yeah.
I think that's a very valid point, Sophie. At Liverpool on that 17th hole, which you'll see next year, around the back of the green, we've had to do quite a bit of sprigging of marram just to try to stop that wind blow, because it's straight off the coastline onto the green, and the club thought this is a bit too much. So marram is useful in that respect, and that stopped it. So.
Could I just ask, when we have cleared stuff in the past, the only problem is it's not only the good stuff that grows back, all the stuff you don't want to grows back in there as well. So is it an ongoing job to clear the bracken and whatever else is going to grow back in these scrapes away?
Yes, there's a degree of consolidation work needed. So in the management plan, what we need is, so initially we do the physical pulling and the grubbing. Now, if we don't go to sand and we just go and we just physically either cut or pull the scrub out, and we leave that humus layer and the nutrient-enriched ground, then you're going to see quite a lot of scrub coming in, and that's happens a lot on golf courses. I was at Gullen on Monday, on the East Lothian coastline this Monday. Been a busy week, and up there I was out with Nature Scott, who's Natural England for Scotland, and they were saying, look at all of this sea buckthorn coming back in. The work's been great, what you've done, but it's just coming back again at the same rate. And that's because all they've done is gone in and tried to clear it without being more vigorous, if you like, without the sand scraping. Now, if you go down to open sand, you're removing the seed bank and you're removing the majority of those suckers, those long adventitious roots that would be growing just under the surface. So it will stop the majority of the need. And there has been concerns by a number of members about herbicide use. On golf courses, it's a part of the toolkit. We do tend to still use herbicides. In the first instance, we should absolutely concentrate on physical pulling, grubbing out the best we can, cutting and pulling, and then scraping that top off. And if we do a good job with the sand scraping, we will reduce the amount of the need to go back and retreat. But if we go back and there's lots and lots of suckers, if we don't have volunteers, we can't expect the green staff to physically pull out everything, then we do tend to resort to chemical use. And the chemical we use is triclopyr. That's the active ingredient. And there's a couple of modern products called Blaster Pro and Icade. They work very well. They're very selective. They only take out woody plants. So they would take out sea buckthorn and any other kind of tree-like plants, but they would leave all of the wildflowers if there were indeed any coming through. You could also have weed plants coming through. At Burnham and Barrow, after the round, it was in the 90s, they took out all of this, another round of sea buckthorn clearance, and the members were concerned about the open sand, and we weren't doing this kind of work then. And we said it's for the wildflowers, and the first things that come up with the evening primroses and all of the plants which are not really the kind of right plants that we're thinking about, but the members said, wow, we see what you mean now. No, that's not what we want. In another couple of years, those will be gone and succession will have taken its course, and we'll get the other plants coming in that we do want. It's just a process, and each time you do an area and we're moving away, that starts to fill in as. But yeah, but to answer your question, there will be a little bit of consolidation required.
With the funding, there's an allowance for that as well. So going in each year and monitoring and re-looking at these areas, because it's certainly not a one-stop job. It is something that we need to tackle, which is why it's a 5-year management plan. And like I say, hopefully we'll go on from that 5-year initial period as well.
My perception would be that the environment has changed quite dramatically over the 50, 60 years, and probably the rate of change is just maybe speeding up. And probably in your 30 years of experience, maybe it's caught everyone by surprise, just the amount of change that happens and how quickly it happens, like the nutrients arriving courtesy of the fact we all drive cars. And therefore, maybe this has come to a head now, more around the country, that we perceive that actually our environment and what's out there has changed quite dramatically, and we need to assist in reverting that change. I just wondered if that's how you perceive it as well. Without us doing anything, then...
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, we are seeing an accelerated change in the environment. I mentioned that with the thickening of the rough and the golfers becoming increasingly frustrated and blaming greenkeepers for fertilising. But there's also a little bit of a reticence within golf clubs, because I've done these management plans at Saunton before, and there's been a real keenness to do it. And then in the first year or two, you will roll out part of it, but then it kind of, members start to worry a little bit, start to raise their voices and their concerns, and so the whole thing falls back again. And then we come back in after maybe a new general manager, new secretary or whatever, after a period of time, and we start the process again and it fades back. But now there is a real need, exactly as you've outlined, for management and management to continue. I was at Luffenham Heath a while ago, this would be a year or two ago, and I was just stood in the rough on the first hole, and a golf ball came and it landed about a foot from me, and I thought, well, that's close, but fine, I'll wait here until the chap comes up. And his mate hit a shot, and it was about 20 yards further on towards the green, but equally his rolled just into the rough. And when the guy got there, I said, your ball is, can't find it, it's gone. And we lost it, and I look at it, and we found it. But his mate, who was up near the green, far better shot, but it had rolled offline. He lost his ball because the rough was just simply too thick, a lack of management. So I think in the management plan as well, we're talking about the idea of a fringing rough. An area, you've got the fairway, you've got the semi, the cut rough, and then you're into the jungle. If we create a fringing rough, and this is now set in the open guidelines, the guidelines for open setup, a fringing rough would be about 4 metres in width, 2 machine widths. But it could widen the landing area of a slice, or narrowing towards the second shot towards the green. But in that area, we cut annually, and we occasionally scarify. Scarifying is cutting vertically. It rips out all of the matting, the thatch and the fibre, and it thins the grasses down. If that connects to the bunkers, and I know now Murray's been really keen to create a number of naturalised bunkers, then that rough connects with those bunkers, and then it runs on towards the green. From the tee, that looks really penal. And I can't, what do I do? It's making you think. It's about shot selection, club selection, and you take it on, and wow, I could have easily have done this, because I can find a golf ball in that. If a ball is further offline, then play a provisional shot, because it's all about stopping, wasting time going around the course. So there's lots of things now we're having to think about to make sure that we combat this kind of a change. But the fringing rough is a really good way forward as well, and that's something that will add structural interest through the grasslands from low to high, and you'll get more flowers perhaps as well through the scarification work, through the fringing rough. So there's a number of measures we've not really mentioned, we've not touched on that one tonight.
So how far would you expect solitary sycamore tree to seed?
Quite far, all the way through the dunes it can go, because it's going to be through wind and it's going to be through bird dispersal. Even if a bird's not picked up in its beak, as you know, birds carry things in the feathers, and even something like a seed like that on a larger bird, if it's stuck in the wing, that would happen. But through seed dispersal as well. And even if in your example, if you say, well, look, I can go out there and I'll show you one 15 yards away, so then you get across to here and you show me that plant next year or next few years when that's seeding, then it will be another 15 metres, and then that one will seed, and there'll be another 15 metres. So it will gradually walk. You know about Himalayan balsam. That's walks down ditches, riverbanks, etc. And sycamore will do the same. So it will spread.
In that case, the club's got a big problem, because, for example, there are sycamore trees at the back of the car park. Great big tall ones. There are sycamore trees all down the bottom side of the car park and around the greenkeeper sheds. So if one goes, they've all got to go.
No, I think you're absolutely right. the club has got a problem, and it's a problem that we need to recognise. We need to manage, and we need to keep managing annually. We cannot stop management and leave things, because it will all turn into a sycamore woodland over time. So the green staff, and particularly Murray, is well aware of the need to continue pulling sapling trees out as and where they occur. That means you can keep the boundary screening, you can keep trees by the road where it's okay and where it's not really any designated interest, but it will require management, and you're absolutely right there. Yeah, Murray does have a perennial job and a perennial problem in controlling that sycamore growth.
Why are we've only got one on the second hole on the west, and if it spreads like you say, why have you only got one?
Number of reasons. Number of reasons. The main one is greenkeeping management. So we're having to do that, but it's putting a burden on the green staff that it doesn't actually need. And the other one is through continued grass cutting to keep cutting it. But the problem with seedlings when you keep cutting them is they get stronger. The roots build up. It's called coppicing. You coppice it down to near ground level. The roots get stronger and stronger. The plants get thicker but stunted. And one day when you come there, you'll probably take your club in and you'll give it a whack. You'll hit the ball, but you'll hit the stump and you'll probably break your wrist, or you'll break the golf club. Because the tree is there, it's just being cut down and cut down and cut down at the same height. It's this high in the rough, and you don't see it, but it's there. The green staff don't see it because they're cutting it every year, and that's another problem. We need to get them out, and so we need to. There's real issues with this, and we need to get them out. Otherwise, it can cause club damage. It can cause injury to yourself. Moreover,
Can I just jump
yeah,
in there?
so John.
Just obviously, these guys have done a fantastic job. So we have got some more questions that were submitted before this evening, which we need to go through. Just conscious of time. These guys, like I said, have done a fantastic job. So I think if we move, maybe one more question from the floor, if anyone's got one, and then we move on.
You said about the great stressing you suppose that some of the scrapes will become pond eventually?
The majority of scrapes won't, but there is opportunity to create more wet grassland areas or humid slacks. So dune slack is the rarest habitat within the dune system, and in some areas where it's already present but dried, it's become what we call terrestrialised over time. So with all the leaf litter and debris, and the soil starts to build up, and it moves away from the groundwater. The winter water level is near the surface, but over time, with leaf deposition soils, then the dune slack moves away from that groundwater and it dries out. What we're saying is we need to remove the top of it again to re-wet it, to allow it to re-wetting. And in that situation, great crested newt could potentially live in those areas. There will be ephemeral though, so that you'll only get water in the winter and then it will dry out. So it would be unlikely that the great crested newt would really take too much advantage of them. But it's more for the botany.
Sorry, Mary, did you want to say something on that?
Do you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. Because you were referring to like the work or that's going on in the wider boroughs, which is being done as part of the Dynamic Dunescapes project, and obviously by that title that implies sort of reducing the stability of the dunes and creating more of a sort of dynamic nature in parts of the dunes. And that would be a good website for you to sort of Google and look at, because a lot of sand dune systems in the country, not just Braunton, but Sefton, where, of course, there's a fair few golf courses, and over in South Wales, are part of this Dynamic Dunescape project. And this is what has been recognised, because sand dunes are the rare habitat, as we've heard, one of the most threatened habitat, really, in the country. And what has been recognised is that you do need these areas, substantial areas of bare sand, to maintain the sort of dynamic nature of them. I mean, these trees that we're talking about, as I say, like sycamore. Sycamore, in a way, is unique in that it's one of the few species that can withstand salt spray. And so that is why it's quite successful in some of these coastal areas, like, obviously, like, the sea buckthorn. There's very few native trees that would be successful in coastal areas. But of course, and I've been really conservationist and done a lot of practical management, sort of conservation volunteer work all my life. But we've really, I'm afraid to say, always regarded sycamore as a sort of weed, really. And that's because of its prolificness at breeding. As I say, it just has baby seedlings like crazy, really, the sycamore. So, and really the ground litter supports very, very little sort of good habitat, native flora. And just quickly, the other thing, these fringe habitats, what I think you were saying about the green fringes, I did notice that, how good some of those were that took up way, those sort of transition between the greens and the roughs. And they were dominated by a lot of plants that we call, like, you might know, some of you, like lady's bedstraw and rest harrow, and a little bit of thyme, of wild thyme. But the rest harrow and the lady's bedstraw are extremely good food plants for, as well as being attractive in their own right when they're flowering. I'm just all for extending these areas, and the whole thing is, as I said in the back of that little book that I did, is to create a mosaic of habitat. We include the scrub, of course, and some of the benefits of the native scrub areas in the east, the more inland areas, but we want the damper scrapes and the flower-rich dry grassland, and then the drier bare area, well, not bare areas, where you get the lovely viper's bugloss and some of the evening primroses and the flowers like that. So it's the mosaic that we're aiming for.
Thank you, Mary. I think in summary to all of this, I think Austin summarised tonight really, really well. At the end of the day, this is of international importance, and it's something that we need to manage, to garner for ourselves and for our grandkids going forward. So thank you for everyone's contribution. Do you want to just...
Yeah, we're just going to put some of the questions on screen, which you probably can't actually read.
Can you?
But
You'll read it.
I'll read through them. I think we've probably answered most of them, but for people who can't be here tonight, we want to make sure that we have seen your questions and hopefully answered them through the talk. So Ian, I can never say that surname. That's the guy from Buchanan. There we go. Thank you. Art Attack, isn't it? Neil Buchanan, he was. Anyway, so what changes have occurred naturally over the past 100 years or so that have encouraged the growth of trees and shrubs on the burrows? And are they not of some benefit in mopping up some of the carbon we produce? So I think we've answered probably the first one, what changes have occurred naturally. More
to Ian's question. Trees mop up carbon. No one's mentioned that one. And they do. But so do the grasslands. Leaf for leaf area, it's very same. Trees are different. Evergreen trees, you think of larch, pine, they're going to have narrow leaves. Broadleaf trees like sycamore are going to have greater carbon capture. Same with grasses. The grasses, Murray wants me to tell him that fescue and bents are the best because they are the golfing grasses that we're trying to conserve. Actually, power is a lot better, and you don't want power, but it's a lot better at carbon capture. So leaf for leaf, unit area per unit area, all plants capture carbon, and the grasslands and this fantastic area you've got out there is a massive carbon sink. The one tree sitting there adds relatively little in terms of the overall area of the site. So yeah, it's a good question, and thank you for that. But I think the grasslands contribute equally and to that, and again, different species all operate slightly differently as to how much carbon they capture. The next one, is the justification for taking out the larger trees, which do provide refuge for birds, but with, so I'll read it all, and habitat for animals as well below. This is from Richard. The 5-year plan removes all the self-seeding trees on the estate. Is it possible to explain why? I've covered that one, I think, at length. These are self-seeding trees, self-set. They are spreading through the dunes at an alarming rate. Often we don't see them because we keep cutting, or Murray, without telling anyone, is simply pulling them out where he finds them. And that's stopping it from becoming a woodland, which I think, as Austin says, is extremely important. We're all in an ecological biodiversity crisis. David Attenborough, King Charles, two very staunch stalwarts, so good they're being mentioned and they're recognised. Is there any justification for the use of pesticides and herbicides? We should always work to cultural controls. There is an hierarchy that we work to. Physical pulling, physical mechanical means first and chemicals last. If we do have to resort to chemicals, then we have to make sure that chemicals we use are appropriate and applied appropriately by certified staff in strict accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations, and so there are strict protocols around it. There's been a lot in the press about neonicotinoids that kill bees and that kind of thing, and that's where a lot of our anxieties come from and concerns come from, justly and rightly so. But the chemicals that we're using, it's a very selective chemical for scrub treatment, and that would be a last resort. So physical pulling first. As we said, the rural's payment would deal with the capital work. Contractors would come in. 3 would be looked at. 1 would be chosen. Part of the questioning would be around their certification, their qualities as appropriate contractors to bring in. So it would be the second round, the follow-up work, this scrub, as it's coming in, where we would look to treat that scrub. We would make sure there's no spray drift, because we would be treating the scrub when it's a foot off the ground, not when it's 4 foot off the ground. So spray drift is a big issue. It'd be spot treated, individual treatments rather than broad scale. In some instances, we could go down the road of weed wiping to make sure we only contact the trees, and that chemical then is taken in, it's imbibed by the plants, and it's used by the plant, and then the plant dies. They are part of our toolkit, but again, they are a last resort.
I think we're all conscious in conservation and in greenkeeping and many other amenity industries that we need to reduce our use and reliance on chemicals, and that's certainly becoming more and more relevant as we hear about them perhaps completely been wiped from use in as early as the next 2 years. So I think there's lots of conversations going on at the moment, speaking with other European countries who can't use anything already, and finding out what practices work best in those different landscapes. So I know it's certainly something that I'm keeping up to date with, because the changes come in. We can't rely on them forever, and yeah.
The next question relates to lapwing. Can we provide any research, and is there any eco students that could perhaps be brought in to actually look at what we could do to bring lapwing back? Is that a valid point, that lapwing are moving further north and they're not nesting down south? I don't really think so. You see them in all of the nature reserve areas where appropriate habitat exists with the mudflats, etc., and on open ground. I think what we need to do is do our best to create more open grassland habitats, either through the thinning or through sand scraping, to try to bring these birds back in. And I think it's prudent that the golf club as a whole take this on, given that it is the emblem of the club. Austin.
Yeah, just a thought on lapwings. I was in the Royal Air Force for 25 years. I was an air traffic controller managing airfields. I then went on to become head of environmental protection policy for the Royal Air Force. We used to have lots of lapwings on airfields, and it was a major problem because of bird strike. And the way we overcame lapwing on airfields was to have long grass spots, because lapwings are flocking birds. They like to be able to see each other, they like the safety in numbers, and if you grow the grass long, then they disappear. So maybe one of the reasons why there's less here is because there's less open ground. I don't know whether they've moved on because of climate change either.
again, that's absolutely correct. They do not like dense and long grass. They can't nest in that. They need more open conditions. They are birds that are having to move more and more into agricultural situations and to open ploughed ground, and there they're getting taken out as we increase the number of crop takes each year. And birds are just not getting a chance to successfully breed in that kind of habitat. So we need to create that kind of habitat down here for them and create open sand, shingle, but reduce the density. We've done at my former employer. We did a lot on bird strikes and trying to create a more dense growth, keep all the invertebrates out and keep it long. So I know where you're coming from on that one. Thank you.
Why is it just golf courses? There's so much going on all around us.
Yeah.
Why are you homing in on golf? I've been down to, just recently come back from Trevose. I go there twice a year for the last 18 years. And I've seen what's going on there, like, firsthand. It hasn't played, and it wasn't just my play, it hasn't played like it has done in the past. And I don't think...
Even, is that the greens that aren't up to scratch?
Well, it's not just the greens, the bunkers, the amount of bunkers going in there, and it's all in the name of ecology. But why is it targeted just for for golf courses? Why do you not deal with the bigger...
It isn't. I suppose that I'm here now because for 35 years I've worked nowhere else other than in golf. My whole aim, as I said right at the start, is to get golf aware of what it's got, and to get the outside world to stop saying that golf is an elitist land use, it's a selfish waste of space and all the rest of it that comes out from that, because golf is everything but that. And we're relying on golf courses now much more heavily for nature conservation, because we've got 3,500 golf courses, 3,300 golf courses through the UK. And they represent a very significant patchwork of habitats, allowing wildlife the chance to move and disperse around the country. Those link up, the golf courses link up with roadside verges and railway embankments, which all allow this kind of corridor effect. That's fundamental. And the other thing about golf courses is that they act as a nuclei for birds and for wildlife to be able to expand their range. We've got habitats on the golf courses that are so kind of critical now, and we need them. We've lost 145,000 miles of hedgerow over the last 40 years or so. We were paying farmers to rip the hedgerows out. We've lost all our songbirds because we've ripped the hedgerows away. We've got hedgerows around the boundary. Golf courses have got hedgerows that they're planting all the time. We need them back in. We need all of these habitats. And golf is doing that. It's doing it for nature, but it's also doing it for the benefit of golf as well. So yes, they're critical. I was at County Louth the other day and I met up with Natural England's counterparts, and they came out, they were quite anti. I think there's been a bit of that here with Natural England, a bit of what the golf club is about, they don't really know. And they were very negative to start with. I took them out on site. Within 15 minutes, they were saying, wow, we need a pilot study on here on this golf course, because I'm playing with 30 acres at County Louth, just off the golf course. Here we've got 200 hectares of land, and it's fantastic. So there's so much potential. But all around the golf courses, they are playing around with those small parcels of land, or sometimes very big parcels of land, trying to do the same. It's just here that we are talking about the golf course tonight, but rest assured that all, Natural England, National Resources Wales, the Scottish, heritage people, and the Irish as well, they're all trying to do their best on these landscapes. And we are living in a very diminishing world, and wildlife survival now is becoming critical, as David Attenborough tries to keep pointing out in the nicest possible way. And so it's not just golf, it's not golf being picked on. We're here today because we wrote a management plan for the golf club in the context of the wider landscape.
Can I just say it's also a lot easier to get onto the pieces of land that you want to do some work on. I mean, there'll be lots of areas that are just so inaccessible that it would cost too much money to even get there. So it is a patch of land that has access.
Yeah, but it's also very private. So unless the golf club as a whole want to take it on, it won't happen. Whereas on the wider nature reserves, there is this desire to do it, and it is happening. It's just at a slower pace than perhaps we can do it. So access often is the main problem on golf, and the public never see golf courses, so they believe that they are the selfish land use, therefore the very privileged few and all the rest of the rubbish that they used to come out with, which is not the case. But it's just that they don't see it. So yeah, you're kind of right, but access can be even more difficult sometimes. It's all up to the will and the desire to do something. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I think we've probably answered that top one.
Okay, let's move down.
I kind of answered that one, sorry. So the RNA project is the one I mentioned earlier, so the biodiversity project, so hopefully that's answered that question. The club will receive a baseline report with the results of this year, which covers did we hit 200 different plants? I can't remember if we did or not. We were very close. And the birds recorded, invertebrates, etc., along with recommendations for management in line with the overall management plan. And like I said, that is intended to be a 5-year project as well, so hopefully we'll run alongside the management plan quite well.
The drivers, and we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
So I think, just finishing on the last one, it says that what are the real drivers for sand scrapes? I think we've really gone through that now at some length, that all of this, in summary, I suppose, finishing off, the site is internationally important for wildlife. It's also massively important for you as golfers. The more we can do to protect this site, conserve this site, the more you and your children are going to benefit from it. And as I said earlier, if we can get visitors to keep coming, it means that we can optimise the wealth of the golf club as well. And that is important. But how do we do that? We need a site that people want to come and play. Americans and the visitors are coming across increasingly now to the UK to play on our best sites. And you're in the top 100. Why? Not because it's a woodland, because it's another random pay and play course down the road. It's because it's Saunton. And there's a benchmark that you have to keep. We can't allow management to just follow without any kind of intervention, because it will revert, it will change. You'll drop out of the 100, you'll stop receiving the visitors, the course will change out of all recognition. It's only because of the management work that Murray and the teams before him have been doing that we've got this site and it's still being conserved and it's still pretty good. And all we're saying now is we need to retain some level of balance to make sure that that continues in the future. The management plan for both the east and west courses hopefully provides that, and you've got loads of opportunity, if you've not read them, to do so. I think there has been a number of revisions from the first editions that we put out, concentrating on one or two areas more about the chemical use and the concerns that members have had. So have a look at those as well. But thank you for listening. I hope that we put some context into why we produce the management plans. Thank you.